All right, now the COVID-19 vaccinations are here. Many people, of course, are lining up to get vaccinated, but not everyone. What if you don't want to get one, but your employer says no shot, no job? Well, joining me now to discuss COVID-19 vaccinations and workplace requirements is Tampa attorney Robert Shimberg, who heads up the COVID-19 response team at the law firm of Hill Ward Henderson. Thank you so much for joining us, Robert.
Thank you for having me.
All right, this is going to be a real question with a lot of workplaces. So let's just start right in on it. What can an employer do to make sure you get a vaccine, or can they?
Sure. So an employer has a couple of options. I mean, an employer can either encourage their employees to get vaccinated, when it's their turn in line to get vaccinated, or an employer has the option to require their employees to get vaccinated. There's a couple of exceptions, though, to the requirements.
What are those exceptions?
So the two most widely held exceptions are that if getting a vaccination is contrary to what they call a sincerely held religious belief, number one, or number two, if a person is unable to be vaccinated due to a disability, then in those cases, based on the EEOC and other authority, then an employer could not require the employee to get vaccinated, and they would have to work to try to accommodate the employee, with their job under reasonable circumstances.
Robert, what comes to my mind is an issue regarding school children. So a lot of school districts require vaccinations before children can come to school. Is this a similar sort of situation or no?
So, sure. I mean, it's similar from the standpoint of in the workplace. I mean, one of the paramount things that employers are looking for their employees, for their customers, their guests is safety. And so certainly under the umbrella of safety, absolutely, that's where, vaccinations would fit under, taking into account those exceptions and taking into account, the ramifications as far as, are concerned with requiring a vaccine.
As someone who works in an environment, and here at Spectrum 8 News 9, we have hundreds, literally, of people that work here. What assurances can workers request, if any, that others in their workspace have all been vaccinated?
Sure. So, I mean, certainly, if you look at that question, I guess, from right now, workplaces, generally speaking, are well advised to follow the CDC guidelines, which say that, in an indoor space, that people should wear, their face coverings, their mask, unless they can social distance. And so, at the same time, the employees can expect, similar safety from the standpoint of once a vaccine is widely available. And again, subject to a lot of different variables there. But I mean, absolutely, the employees can say that, we would like people to be protected, to protect us, the employees, and our families, and make that request of the workplace.
Yeah, I think that a lot of employers would probably, I don't want to say pass the buck, but I think a lot of them would probably go, well, the government says that we have to do this. Are there actually any government requirements or regulations regarding vaccinations?
So there's not a requirement as to a private employer that says that you have to get your employees vaccinated, for most employers. But what there is, the ability under the EEOC and others says that, if you want to require it, then you absolutely can require it. And again, you have to look at the individual scenario, the individual type of business. Is it an indoor related business with employees? Is it more of an outdoor related business? So a lot of different considerations go into the final decision making by the business. Are they going to require it? Are they going to encourage it?
Are there any differences between public companies and private companies? I know in the past we've done stories regarding contraception and Hobby Lobby and things along those lines where they're like, no, we're not going to do that. Does it make a difference whether your employer is a public company or a private company?
So in this case, it really doesn't make a difference. I mean, you have those two notable exceptions, that we've talked about, and absent those, the employers have the ability to set the parameters as long as they take into account those widely accepted EEOC mandated exceptions.
All right, considering that this is a major health issue, we're talking about a global pandemic. What rights do employees have concerning their private medical data, and what information is provided to your employer, and when it comes specifically to COVID-19 and vaccinations?
Sure. So, I mean, employees obviously enjoy many rights with regard to their private health information that can't be shared without their consent. Now, in a situation like this, if you say, and you have a blanket requirement that, employees, you must be vaccinated, if that's what the business chooses to do, then it becomes more of a, that's the rule at the business. And if someone fits under the exception, then they would go to HR or the appropriate person at the business to explain why they are not able to be vaccinated. So the employee privacy with regard to the data or the vaccine data wouldn't come into play so much in this scenario, other than the case of the people going to the business and saying either exception 1 applies to me or exception 2 applies to me. Then generally speaking, the business wouldn't be able to share that information about the employees to anyone else.
That makes perfect sense. All right, Robert, what last bit of advice would you have for both employees and employers when it comes to this vaccine and how we move forward from here?
Sure. So with regard to the employees, first of all, Liz, and you touched on the point earlier. I mean, employees have the expectation to say that they want to work in a safe workplace. And with everything that people have gone through over the last 10 or 11 months with COVID-19, that there's been all kinds of issues that have been raised about safety in the workplace to make sure that the employee is not subjected to an unsafe working place. And that can carry ramifications both from government investigations or government agencies like OSHA saying that the employee is entitled to a safe workplace. And the employee themselves has rights that if they choose to say that they want to bring a claim against the business because they believe it's not a safe workplace, and they certainly have that right. So the employee should make sure that they understand the rights they have in the workplace as it results to a safe workplace. With regard to the employer, again, the employer needs to weigh the standpoint of keeping their employees safe, keeping their customers safe, keeping their visitors to the workplace safe, and taking into considerations like, is this a place where most of the work is going on outside? And if most of the work is going on outside, then they're going to look at factors like, is it sufficient to be able to have social distancing that may work, as opposed to, does the business believe that vaccines should be required or should they be encouraged? Whereas if everybody's working in tight quarters on the inside, the business may weigh it kind of differently and say, because of the close quarters, because of wanting to or needing to have a full complement of employees there, they may say, we need to weigh it a little more closely about encouraging versus requiring. And the advice I would give is that the business wants to weigh the factors and the ramifications as to the decisions they make, and they want to do it thoughtfully. And the last thing that they want to think about is, because of this rollout period that we have, that not only is it going to take time for people to get their first shot, but by the time everybody that wants to get a shot or is required to get a shot has gotten their second shot, that could be 4 or 5 or 6 months or more into the future. So that's another consideration that the employer needs to think about as they weigh all of the factors in this equation.
Robert, that is some very, very good information. Thank you. Robert Shimberg from Hill Ward Henderson. Thank you for joining us today. That was great.
Thank you for having me.